Hello everyone, this is Gabrielle Lawson. I'm here to talk to you today about EPA Wetland Module 1, Introduction to Biological Assessment. In 1999, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency began work on this series of reports entitled Methods for Evaluating Wetland Condition. The purpose of these reports is to help states and tribes develop methods to evaluate the overall ecological condition of wetlands using biological assessments and nutrient enrichment of wetlands, which is one of the primary stressors damaging wetlands in many parts of the country. This information is intended to serve as a starting point for states and tribes to eventually establish biological and nutrient water quality criteria specifically refined for wetland water bodies. Biological assessments evaluate the health of a water body by directly measuring the condition of one or more of its taxonomic assemblages, macroinvertebrates or plants, and supporting chemical and physical attributes. A major premise of bioassessments is that the community of plants and animals will reflect the underlying health of the water body in which they live. Biological indicators reflect the cumulative effects of multiple stressors. They integrate the effects of stressors over time. They are a great way to assess the health of your wetland. They show pollution, and they are easier to measure than processing sediment samples. In recent years, a growing number of state and federal organizations have started to develop bioassessment methods and indexes of biological integrity, the IBI for wetlands. An IBI is an index that integrates several biological metrics to indicate a site's condition. A common approach among these organizations is to first sample attributes of a taxonomic assemblage in wetlands, ranging from good condition to poor condition. The data are reviewed to identify metrics, which are attributes of the assemblage that show a predictable and empirical response to increasing human disturbance. After the metrics are tested and validated, they are combined into an IBI, which provides a summary score that is easily communicated to managers and to the public. Once wetland bioassessment methods are developed, wetland managers can use them for a variety of applications. Wetland managers can use bioassessments to evaluate the performance of wetland restoration activities or best management practices, such as buffer strips, in restoring and protecting wetland health. Wetland managers can also use bioassessments to more effectively target resources for restoring, protecting, and acquiring wetlands. The U.S. EPA formed the Biological Assessment of Wetlands Workshop Group, pronounced BOG, in 1997 to help state agencies develop and apply wetland bioassessments. Wetland bioassessments involve the following 6 general stages of development: selecting one or more biological assemblages to monitor, classifying wetlands, selecting wetlands across a gradient of human disturbance, sampling chemical and physical characteristics of wetlands, analyzing data, and reporting results. As discussed in wetland bioassessment case studies, BOG members have used a variety of biological assemblages in wetland bioassessments. These include plants, macroinvertebrates, algae, amphibians, birds, and fish. The selected assemblage must be cost-effective to sample and identify. However, a number of other factors affect an assemblage's practical usefulness and ability to reflect real changes in wetland condition. Plants and macroinvertebrates are the most commonly used. Vegetation is a convenient assemblage because it occurs in most wetland types. Macroinvertebrates have been widely used in stream bioassessments and show a lot of promise for wetlands. Algae have been used to a limited degree, but offer an inexpensive and effective alternative for some wetland types. Amphibians offer many advantages but have insufficient taxonomic diversity in some regions for traditional methods. The mobility of birds makes them well suited for landscape level assessments. Fish have many advantages that have been demonstrated in other water bodies, but the fish assemblage is limited to a few wetland types. In summary, different assemblages have different advantages depending on the purpose of the project, region of the country, and wetland types being evaluated. For the purposes of developing bioassessment methods, the goal is to establish classes of wetlands that have similar biological communities that respond similarly to human disturbances. Recognize that the wetland classification and classes used for one assemblage may not be suitable for another assemblage. For example, wetland classes developed to obtain biologically similar macroinvertebrate communities may not work when applied to another assemblage such as plants. Always test existing wetland classes to ensure they are biologically meaningful to identify the effects of human disturbances on the selected assemblage. After classifying wetlands, researchers select sampling sites across a disturbance gradient for each wetland class. These sites are used to document how a biological assemblage responds to increasing levels of anthropogenic stressors. Regardless of the gradient used, it is crucial to select wetlands that range from minimally disturbed reference sites to severely degraded wetlands, with some sites in between. When selecting sampling methods, it is important to use standard sampling methods to establish quality assurance protocols and ensure the comparability of data. Ensure the sampling methods are repeatable. Consistent results make consistent results. Standardize the sampling period. The composition and abundance of taxa in biological assemblage will change during the course of a year. Retain some flexibility in sampling period. Although it is important to maintain a standard sampling period, it helps to retain some flexibility in scheduling sampling. Annual climatic variations can delay or accelerate biological process. Consider time and resource constraints. Biologists are often tempted to create elaborate sampling designs using several methods. However, the complexity of the methods must be balanced with the time and resources available. When used independently, measurements of a wetland's physical characteristics are not appropriate for estimating wetland health because they do not adequately reflect the condition of biological communities. However, they can be useful while classifying wetlands, interpreting biological data, and identifying potential stressors. Some common parameters used are water chemistry, that's nutrients, pH, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, dissolved metals, and turbidity. Commonly measured is substrate, the type of soil, sediment chemistry. Wetland topography figures in water depth, characteristic vegetative structure, characteristics of immediate surrounding land use, and watershed characteristics like land use, percent natural vegetation, and the nearest wetland. After biologists sample and identify the taxa in an assemblage, they can prepare a list of taxa names and the abundance or percent cover for each. The challenge facing the biologist is to identify ways to analyze these data to provide meaningful measures of biological condition. Remember, the goal is to evaluate the data and determine to what degree the wetlands are being damaged by human activities. Both multi-metric indexes, such as the indexes of biological integrity, and statistical approaches have been used in stream, lake, and estuary bioassessments. After graphically and statistically analyzing potential metrics, researchers select the best performing metrics to include in an IBI. Ideally, an IBI should consist of approximately 8 to 12 metrics. One way of combining metrics into an IBI is to assign values of 5, 3, or 1 to the measures for each metric, where a 5 corresponds with the least disturbed condition, a 3 corresponds to intermediate disturbance, and a 1 corresponds to the most disturbed condition. For a metric such as the number of intolerant taxa, a wetland with a lot of intolerant taxa may receive a 5, and a wetland with no intolerant taxa may receive a 1. The metric scores associated with a wetland are usually added together to calculate the IBI score. Here are the recommendations to developing metrics in IBIs. First, develop a separate IBI for each assemblage, because it makes it easier for other organizations to use or adapt the IBI. Never use an attribute as a metric without testing it first. All sampling and analytical methods, including metrics, should be tested, verified, and calibrated to regional conditions before they are used in a new area of the country. Investigate outliers. Scatter plots of the metric or IBI values of individual wetlands plotted against a disturbance gradient often have outliers or values that are inconsistent with the majority. Investigation of outliers can identify important stressors and land use characteristics. Avoid directly comparing the I scores of wetlands in different classes. IBI scores should be calibrated for each wetland class as defined by the classification system used. Perhaps the greatest benefit of an IBI is that it summarizes and presents complex biological information in a format that is easily communicated to managers and the public. When reporting bioassessment results, the IBI score should be accompanied by the following information: narrative description of overall biotic condition in comparisons to reference wetlands of the same region and type, the number of values, number of taxa and scores for each metric, and narrative descriptions of each metric in comparison to reference conditions of the same region and wetland type. As envisioned by Section 303 of the Clean Water Act, developing water quality standards is a joint effort between states and the EPA. The states have primary responsibility for setting, reviewing, revising, and enforcing water quality standards. The EPA develops regulations, policies, and guidance to help states implement the program and oversees states' activities to ensure that their adopted standards are consistent with the requirements of the Clean Water Act and relevant water quality standard guidelines. The EPA has authority to review and approve or disapprove state standards and, where necessary, to promulgate federal water quality standards. A water quality standard defines the environmental goal for a water body or a portion thereof by designating the use or uses to be made of the water and setting criteria necessary to protect those uses and prevent degradation of water quality. The development and widespread use of biocriteria has lagged behind chemical-specific and toxicity-based water quality criteria. States historically focused on developing chemical and physical criteria. The information obtained by bioassessment methods fills a function missing from the traditional chemically oriented approach to water quality. The IBI is a great evaluation tool. States can use it to evaluate the success of restoration activities and best management practices, such as buffer strips, by requiring follow-up assessments in management plans. By periodically conducting bioassessments, states can track the condition of wetlands and learn which management activities work best. States can use this information to improve future management plans and save time and money by targeting the most effective restoration projects and the best management practices that achieve greater environmental benefits. Watershed management is based on sound monitoring data. This includes strategic monitoring, target monitoring to inform management decisions, assessment, evaluating data to determine condition of water bodies, assigning priorities and targeting resources, developing management strategies, making management plans, and implementing activities described in management plans. These ideas are illustrated in the Watershed Management Cycle diagram. Data collection, assessment, strategy development, implementation, and planning are all cyclic and depend on each other. Thank you all.